Kyla Zhao, welcome to How Writers Revise. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
You and I were just chatting a little bit. You sent me one of the best pitches I've ever read to feature you, and it was a no-brainer because I would have loved to have featured you anyway. I love your story, and I want to talk a little more about it, but just for people watching and readers of the How Writers Revise feature, I'm going to really quick read a little bio of you, and then we'll dig in deeper on some of this. Born and raised in Singapore, Kyla Zhao graduated in 2021 from Stanford University with an MA in Communications, Media Studies, and a BA in Psychology. We're going to dig in on that. Right now, she works in marketing at a tech company in Silicon Valley, California. Besides now novel writing, Kyla has an extensive magazine editorial portfolio. Love this too. Previously, she was a fashion and lifestyle writer at Vogue Singapore. She has written for the Singapore editions of Harper's Bazaar and Tatler, covered the Asian Television Awards, and interviewed personalities such as singer Nathan Sykes. And then I also want to talk about the last thing you say in your bio is that you want to champion Asian representation in your work and write the characters of color that you didn't get to read about when you were young. I know that inspired you a lot, but let's start with that. When you were young, what were you a big reader, and what were you reading?
Yeah, I was definitely a really voracious reader. I think one of my earliest childhood memories is my grandparents bring me to the community library, and I would just be in a children's section for the entire day. And honestly, I think my grandparents were so patient because there was nothing for them to do there, but they stayed there with me for like hours and hours on end. And I still remember that the chairs in the children's section were shaped like mushrooms, and I really loved that for some reason. Growing up, I think a lot of the books I read were like Nancy Drew or the Sweet Valley Twins. I don't know if you've heard of any of them. Yeah, but
I
those
grew
were
up on
my
Nancy Drew.
yes, but those were my childhood favorites. But I would say that during the pandemic, one thing I realized was that a lot of the books I read growing up featured white main characters. So like even today, for instance, I remember the description of the main characters in the Sweet Valley Twin series. It was like two twins. And I just remember that they had long blonde hair and they had blue-green eyes that sparkled in the sun and a perfect golden brown Californian tan. And when I was younger, I thought they were the coolest people in the world, and I wanted to be just like them. And I thought that to be like them, I have to look like them.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of internalized Eurocentric ideals of beauty that I had to take a long time. And I'm still kind of in the progress of untangling and unpacking.
Yeah, I think that's pretty pervasive, actually. Did
Yeah.
you write back then?
I did not. I honestly never
Did
thought
you
I
ever
would ever.
think about it?
No, I never thought that I would ever be creative enough to write fiction. Like I've done some writing for like magazines, I've written school essays and research papers, but creative writing, I didn't think I had what it took.
So if you didn't think that, and obviously it's different type of writing, but what got you into into the kind of journalism you were doing for these fantastic high profile magazines?
Well, I really love fashion. And I always love like talking about fashion. I was like, if I want to talk about it, might as well make a living from doing it. And so when I was 16, I was in high school, like I was a sophomore, and I reached out to Harper's Bazaar like in a cold email. And looking back, I'm pretty shocked by my boldness because I didn't know then how high profile it was. If I had known, I don't think I would have dared to try. So I reached out to them. I don't even know if they knew how old I was, but some reason they decided to give me an internship. And so when I was 16, I started writing for them. And I still remember the very first article I ever wrote for Harper's Bazaar. It was about luxury wedding preparation. And I was 16 at that
Oh my
time.
God.
I've never even been in a relationship. And I just thought it was so funny. Like, would the readers, like, how they react if they knew that they were taking wedding advice from a 16-year-old?
So how, first of all, did they accept what you wrote? And second, how did you research and write that when it was so far outside your life experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was like a listicle format, so it wasn't
Okay.
too hard. It wasn't like I had to share my personal experience because I had none. Yeah, and I honestly don't know if they like knew for sure that on my resume I said I was still like, in grade 10 in high school. Like I never covered it up or lied about it, but I guess for some reason they just glossed over it. yeah, so I ended up there. And once I was there, I never broadcasted my age or anything. So maybe they just thought I was like a young looking 20-year-old something person.
So was it an in-person internship at that time?
Yeah, it
That's
was.
crazy.
Yeah, looking back, I cringed so hard because those are some of the most fashionable people. And I had like a very teenage sense of fashion. Like I thought I was the coolest person then. I thought I was wearing really cool clothing. But looking back, it's like, God, no.
It's Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah, exactly. I
So
was very much the before picture.
obviously, I want to come back to this because it clearly informed your current book that's about to come out, Fraud Squad, which I do want to
Yeah.
talk about. But so you parlayed this internship while you were majoring in psychology, right? And
Hmm.
then you got a master's in communications.
Yes.
So all during this college, you're not thinking you're going to write at all? Are you thinking you're going to pursue journalism, or are you thinking like, is creative writing even on your radar?
No,
Fiction.
I think along the way, I kind of started discovering other interests of mine besides journalism. And now I no longer work in journalism. I do marketing analytics for a tech company, so it's pretty
Mhm.
different. I work with numbers and data, no writing whatsoever besides emails. Um, yeah, so I think it's kind of funny how that turned out, to be honest. But yes, like in college, even though I love journalism, even though I was still writing for magazines and freelancing here and there, I never thought about writing a book. A book seems so long to me. And because I love reading, I discover so many good books and so many good authors. And the idea that I can even call myself an author alongside Dom was just like such a bizarre thought to me.
So what made you finally try?
Honestly, I think the pandemic, um, it's kind of like there are multiple facets to it. So like one, it was like I come from Singapore and I really wanted to go back home to be with my family during the pandemic. I was in my third year at Stanford then, and all my friends were returning home.
Mm.
And on social media, I would see them with their parents, like reconnecting. But at that time, I was also interning with a company based in California. And for security reasons, they couldn't let me work remotely from outside the country. So I had to stay in California. And for most of 2020, I was staying alone.
Oof.
And I thought I would be okay with it because I've always been pretty introverted and a homebody. But I think the loneliness really got to me. Like I didn't see anyone for like months and months on end. That was during a time when, people were like dying, like the death rates were honestly atrocious. So I was terrified of even stepping outside of my tiny studio apartment. And yeah, I got really lonely, so I started reading a lot. I wanted to kind of lose myself in this like imaginary world. But then there was also a time when anti-Asian racism was really skyrocketing across not just the United States, but also around the world. And whenever I opened the news or whenever I went on social media, I would see photos of Asian victims who have been attacked, and I would see like elderly Asians, and that really reminded me of my parents and my grandparents. And then I would go to my books, and then I would realize that all the characters in my books, like they were mostly white as well, and I just wasn't really seeing anyone that looked like me or that I could identify with and relate to. That wasn't, like a sad story being portrayed in the news. And I think that was when I kind of got the idea, like, if I can't find what I'm looking for, I might as well try writing my own book. And because I was living alone at the time, I didn't really have anyone else's opinions to care about. I wasn't worried about what they would think if I just suddenly started writing a book. So I honestly kept this as a secret to myself for like several months. And even when I announced my book deal, I think most people in my life didn't even know that I had written a book. So it took everyone by surprise.
Okay, because I've done this a long time, and I know there are authors watching right now who are going, wait, wait, wait. She never had written anything. Or anything beyond journalism, starts writing during the pandemic, and now she has a book deal. Can you take me from one to the other? Because this is the dream, and it sounds like it came pretty fast to you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I got really lucky in some aspects. I think the biggest thing was that hitting into it, I never thought about getting published, and I didn't know how hard it would be. and how overwhelming and confusing the industry was. Because if I had known, I would have found it just way too daunting. And I don't think I would have thought I would have any chance of success whatsoever. So I wrote my book, and that was actually, like I think it gave me a sense of structure and a routine during the pandemic, which I really needed. It really put me out of like a pretty dark spot in my life. And I think just being able to go into this world I created, to go to the characters I created, it really felt like this sounds so corny, but it almost felt like finding friends. Like my characters were kind of living in my head for that entire summer of 2020. Like my story was the first thing I thought about when I woke up, the last thing on my mind before I fell asleep. So it was really like with me constantly that year. So I finished the first draft, and I'm usually like a planner and I'm really organized. But just for this book, I was like, I'm not gonna plan it. I'm just gonna see like where this goes. And if I ever don't want to continue, I would stop. I just wanted to do something that would make me happy then. So I started writing, didn't plan it, was just kind of like coming up with a story as I wrote. I finished it at the end of that summer. And that was when I kind of realized that because I didn't do any planning, my book was full of plot holes that I had to go back and fix. So editing the book took so much longer than drafting. It took like twice as long. I was revising for 6 months. And I did also pass it to a few friends to read. And it was actually them who gave me the idea that I could like that this what could actually be published and that this story could be turned into a book. I didn't think it was possible, and I kind of needed someone else to tell me that that was like a viable like path.
So you were literally just writing it to kind of entertain yourself,
Yeah,
keep
exactly. And
yourself
which is why I
company.
didn't really care about how good or bad the book was. I'll say that like my whole life, I have cared a lot about like what other people think of the work I produce, because I was always writing for magazines, right? Like I was always executing someone else's vision. I was writing about another brand, but for the first time, this was something entirely of my own creation. And my only thinking was, if I liked it, if I enjoyed it, then that's what matters. So I didn't think about making it good enough for other people.
I've talked to a lot of authors for this feature, and almost all of them say that the freest and most creative they ever felt was in their first draft, the first story they ever tried, because of exactly
I
what you're saying.
100% agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Like I think that was honest, like even though I have several more books coming out in the next 2 years, even though I think I've gotten a lot more efficient at writing and I've become a better
Really more
writer.
efficient than 3 months.
Yeah, no, genuinely, after I became a plotter, I became a lot more efficient, with revisions as well. But I don't think anything really quite captures that magic of writing your first ever draft and just not really caring and daring to try anything.
So how did you go? So your friend suggested you start querying, and as you said, it's a pretty daunting industry. What happened next? Like, how did you go from so recently and quickly doing that and then getting a 3-book deal with, remind me who your publisher is?
Penguin Random House,
With a
Berkeley.
major publisher.
Um, I think I went on Twitter. I think someone suggested I go on Twitter because that was where all the writers were. So I went on Twitter and I met some amazing people. Some of whom are like still my good friends to this day after like almost 2 years. I don't even call them my writing friends anymore. I think of them as just like friends. And it was because of them that I learned a lot about the industry. Because I mean, even though Twitter is kind of like on fire these days, but back then, like that was really the place to be if you were an aspiring writer. And even though like there were published authors who I really looked up to, but there were also people just like me who had just written a manuscript and didn't know like where else to go. So we're kind of all figuring it out at the same time, and we're all like helping out one another.
That's
And
nice.
another thing I discovered was that, there's this whisper network, and I think that's so important for authors from marginalized backgrounds, because there are definitely some bad apples in the industry, and having people who have been through it before tell you like what to look out for, that is so helpful.
How did you find and connect with those people?
I think people were just really helpful and they were really open to helping people. And that's what I try to do as well now for aspiring authors. Like my Twitter DMs are always open to anyone, even people whom I don't follow or people who don't follow me. Like if anyone wants to ask advice about the process or about specific people, and if I think I have something constructive to say, I would always like share it. I think that's really what helped me avoid certain pitfalls, and I hope I can like pay that forward.
That's cool. The writing community is so supportive for the most part, I
It
think,
is, yeah.
because of that, because I think people reach back and then somebody else pays it forward. Okay, so I still have to know how I still have to know. You found these people on Twitter.
Yes.
And then how does that go from that to either an agent or a publisher?
Yeah. So okay, I'm trying to remember. That was like 2 years ago. So I revised my book with some beta readers' help. I was also part of a program called Pitch Wars,
Mhm.
which is now defunct. But that was I think the first time I really met this like writing community. So I joined Twitter in September, October actually, I think. So a while
Of
after I finished my first draft, and I really showed it
2021?
to 2020.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been a long process. So I went on Twitter in like October 2020, and then that was when I heard about something called Pitch Wars, and I decided to give it a shot. And then I got into Pitch Wars, and I met some of my best friends through the program. I also learned how to revise a book for the first time, and that was actually, yeah, like revising it was really, really hard. Like even today, I still feel not super confident about my revising abilities just because the first time I revised the Fraud Squad, I kind of messed it up and I kind of had to rewrite everything from scratch. I was breaking my book, basically. It was, yeah, it felt like I was wasting a lot of time, like going nowhere. And in fact, I don't know how much you know about Pitch Wars, but there is this like agent showcase at the end of the program, and my book wasn't even done, so I had to skip the agent showcase. And that was kind of sad because I would see like all my fellow Pitch Wars friends like going through the showcase, and then it felt like they were all in this together, and then they were getting amazing agents, and I kind of felt like I was falling behind. And that was also when I was doing my last semester of school, so it's just like quite a lot of going on at once. But then I did finally finish my manuscript in late March, I want to say. And then I started querying. And then I sent my book out to like different agents, got a few offers, and I eventually signed with one from CAA.
Okay. And then what was the process of selling the book? Did you guys go right on, did you go straight to the market with it, or what did you do?
No, I think we waited like 1 month while my agent was putting together like the pitch and like choosing editors that she thinks would be the best for my book. And I was doing like one last round of like light revisions. By that point, my book was like, I think I had done all I could for it. So we went out on sub the day before my 23rd birthday, actually. So that was really nice. It felt like, the start of a new chapter of my life, hopefully. And I still remember writing an email to myself the day I went on sub. It was basically like, like Kyla, you have to accept the fact that this book would most likely not sell. And that's okay, like because writing this book, like the process of writing it, I think really did change me and kind of changed how I viewed myself and
How
what
do you
I
mean?
um I think it taught me discipline. It also taught me that I was like more capable than I imagined I would be. And I taught myself that I could rely on myself. I think back in school, because I was always like surrounded by people, I never had the time or the space to do a lot of deep reflection. But when I was writing my book during the pandemic, it was really just me and my story. And the process of writing it helped me unpack a lot of things that were going on in my head, and it helped me learn more about myself. um yeah, and no matter what, like even if the book didn't sell, like I wrote a book, like that's still one of like the top accomplishments of my life, the fact that I
Mm.
started and finished an entire book. So yeah, that's what I was telling myself. So we went on and sub, and I was bracing myself to wait for a pretty long time because that's what my author friends were telling me. But then my agent heard back interest from the first editor, like I think within 2 days. And I think publishing is just one of those things where, when things move fast, they do move fast, even though it's usually pretty slow. So things started moving really fast. And then because we heard interest from multiple publishing houses, my agent did this thing called setting up an auction. And I honestly thought it would be like in the movies, like where everyone would raise their little cards and shout out their offers or whatever. But no, it was all done over email. And only my agent was part of the email. So I heard everything secondhand through her. So I wasn't really like part of the excitement. And on the day my auction closed, I was in Singapore. I was graduating remotely. And because of the time zone difference, it was already 2 a.m. So I had to stay up till 2 a.m. to hear the results of the auction. So yeah, that was exciting.
I'll bet it was. Well, congrats. That's huge. So how has it been different? So you get a 3-book deal, correct?
It's actually a 2-book adult novel deal with Berkeley. And then I have a children's novel coming out from another Penguin Random House imprint in 2024. So these are 2 separate book deals.
Okay. Have you started writing the second in your Berkeley deal?
Yes, I sent in my first draft, and I
Oh,
think
okay.
it's supposed to come out next November, but I've not done any revisions for it yet. So for all I know, it could be trash.
So how was the process? You talk about the freedom of that first draft because you were just writing it for yourself.
Yeah.
Writing under a deadline, writing towards someone's expectations, writing after huge success like that when the expectations are so high. How did that change your experience, or did it, in the second manuscript?
It definitely did. Like the first draft of my second manuscript was actually due in December, but I submitted it like way back in August because I just knew, like right now, like I'm in the midst of doing all these promo for the Fraud Squad and reviews are rolling in. And even though I never go on Goodreads or anything, like I was really afraid that I would hear something and it would just like demoralize me and I wouldn't have the motivation to write my second book. So I made sure to finish the first draft like really early before all these things happened so that I could write it in the best headspace possible. But definitely when you're writing on contract, it's a job once you have a contract, and because Berkeley, my imprint, they have a very specific brand
Mhm.
and they're also cultivating a brand for me. So the scope is definitely more narrow than when I was writing my first book.
Is that did that make writing it harder for you, or did it come as easily as did it flow as quickly as that first one?
Um, I don't think it made writing necessarily harder because I really do enjoy writing about the topics that I am. So I don't know how much I can share about my second book, but I guess I can share that it combines 2 things I'm very familiar with and that I like, fashion and Silicon Valley technology. So I find that fascinating. And I would have written about it anyway, but it just feels like now I have to get, additional levels of approval for everything from like the idea stage, and so on and so forth.
You talked about the revision process, how much it taught you and how much harder it was than you thought. Did that change the way you wrote the second book? You said you had not been a plotter before and you are now. Was that because of the revision process?
Yes, I'm a strict plotter now. Actually, that's not true. I wouldn't say I'm a strict plotter. I think another thing I discovered after writing 3 books is that my writing approach is always changing. And I think that's okay. Like there's really no one size fits all approach. And even the writer themselves, we're always like evolving. So our methods would always evolve. So for my children's book, I was a pretty strict plotter. I actually wrote my children's book before my second adult novel. I wrote it in November 2020. It was my NaNoWriMo project during the pandemic. But for my second adult novel, even though I had outlined it, I didn't write chronologically, which kind of surprised me because I was always a stickler for like writing it linearly. But for the second adult novel, I didn't. There were just some scenes that I was more excited about writing, so I would get to those first.
So you skipped around. That's interesting. I've heard writers say
Yeah,
they
and
do
then I
that.
will kind of like stitch it back together. And that was also a really interesting process.
So the children's book that came about, why? Just because of the memory of all the ones you'd read when you were young, or was that another sort of, well, this is fun, let's see what happens?
I think I was going through another dark spot in my life. I think honestly, all my books were inspired by like rough patches in my life. I very much write to like unpack myself and unpack my head. So I wrote that in November, and that was during the 2020 presidential elections. And I was also feeling kind of depressed then for like different reasons. And so I started writing this book, and I wanted to write a children's novel because I really wanted some sense of like innocence at a time when the world felt really bleak and it seemed like all the adults were in the world were like behaving really oddly. I wanted to write the story of a child and from a child's perspective. And so my book is about a young female chess prodigy. And everyone always asks me, like, were you inspired by the Queen's Gambit? Like, no, because I didn't know about the show when I was writing it. And actually, The Queen's Gambit would have been a perfect title for my book, but Netflix got that first.
And a great comp.
Yeah.
Kind of. So do you plan to continue to write both?
Um, I don't know yet because my children's novel, it's a standalone novel. Well, all my novels are standalone novels, but my children's book is a one book deal.
Okay.
And I actually originally submitted it as a young adult book, but then it got aged down to middle grade. And I'm actually revising it right now. And this, I think, is the most challenging revision I've done so far because changing the age group requires changing the voice. And I don't know about you, but I find middle grade voice really hard to capture like perfectly to maintain that sense of like youthful innocence, even though I'm writing about some pretty heavy topics like sexism. So yeah.
Mm. Are you in your children's book? Are you also you talked about Asian representation in that making you want to write your adult books? Was that also part of your motivation with your children's books?
Yeah, for sure. I knew that I wanted all my characters to be Asian, but it wasn't like my books aren't the kind where a person's ethnicity or race is the focal point of the book. It's more that I want to convey that their race is just one aspect of them, but that they live such vibrant, multifaceted lives that being Asian doesn't define them and doesn't define their lives. It's not like, you read a book about like a white character and then they wake up and they're like, oh, because I am white, I'm going to eat cheese. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I wanted to
Right.
convey with my book. Like, yes, they're Asians, but
But
that's
it's
it.
just it's just having them in a book that they weren't in when you were younger, right?
Yeah,
Like any
exactly.
other like white people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want kids to be able to grow up and see Asians on the screen and in books and not have that be a big deal because it's not. Like, it should be
Yeah.
a common thing that we see people who look like us.
Um what's his name? David Levy, Daniel Levy from Schitt's Creek talked about
I was
that.
just watching the show. It's my comfort show.
It's the best show, but he talked about that with his character and his boyfriend, whose name is escaping me. But he said
Patrick.
Patrick, he said he didn't want to make it a focal point. They didn't want to have gay storylines. They didn't want to deal with what it's
Exactly.
like. He just wanted to show that this is another aspect of life.
I know, like
People
I
you
think
will
that's why
meet.
it's my comfort show because everything just it feels so easy. Like,
Yeah.
yes, like this is how it's meant to be, and we don't have to make a big deal out of it.
Everybody's just who they are and no big
Yeah.
deal. I love
Hmm.
that. Okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So please stop me if that's what I'm doing. What I'm hearing and what I think is really interesting about your story is that you're still pursuing this career you had intended to pursue. You hadn't set out to be a writer. You did this because you wanted to do it. It struck you. You love it. It's creative. It's fun. It's an outlet. Do you think of yourself as a writer? Like, is this a career? Are you one of the writers who says, oh, someday I'm going to quit my day job and write? Or is it still that joyful kind of side hobby that you were pursuing during the pandemic, during school?
Yeah, I don't know. I think even today, when someone like recently someone asked me like, "Oh, like how does it feel being a writer?" and I had to pause and think about it because I'm like, "Wow, like yeah, technically, I guess I am a writer because I wrote a book." But it feels so weird to call myself that because I'm constantly still reading and still discovering amazing books. And then just when I think that I'm somewhat decent at writing, I'll write this book that's just like incredible, and then this author is just like on a whole other level, and I'm like, yeah, like this is a proper author. I'm like nothing compared to them. So yeah, I think I'm trying not to put too much pressure on myself by like labeling myself. And for now, this is very much still something that I do for fun. If one day I ever feel like writing brings me more stress and joy, like I'll just stop. I'll do this for as long as I enjoy it.
I love that you're just riding the ride. I think it's such a tough business, as you pointed out. And and it's not always a very lucrative business, although it sounds like you had a great situation. But that's very unusual. And so I think that the best thing we can do is stay in touch with that creative impulse that made us just want to do this thing. I love that you're doing that and that you've had such success. So your book comes out January 17th. Yes.
Yeah.
From Berkeley, called The Fraud Squad. Will you tell people a
Mhm.
little bit about it and also where they can find you and learn more?
Yes. So the pitch for the Fraud Squad is a working class woman. She dreams of writing for Singapore's poshest magazine, but her low socioeconomic status means that no one takes her seriously and she's being gate-kept out of this world. And so she hatches a scheme of pretending to be a socialite, infiltrating high society in order to get onto the radar of the editor-in-chief, impress her enough to get her dream job. But it's so easy to lose yourself in this glamorous new world. And as she sinks deeper into her fraud, her fears of being found out also increase, especially when there is a mysterious gossip columnist hunting for high society dirt. And it can be best compared to Crazy Rich Asians meets The Devil Wears Prada meets Gossip Girl and Inventing Anna.
It sounds so fun. Oh, Inventing Anna was great. It sounds so fun. And you've gotten such good reviews, including Publishers Weekly. I was reading. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Where can people find you and connect with you?
Would you like me to spell my social media handles as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah. And I'll put it in the comments as well.
Okay, so you can find me on Twitter. I just realized that my username on every single platform is different. So this is gonna be a little bit
I
hard.
did that too. And then I wanted to gouge out my eyes with a grapefruit spoon.
I know, like why did I not plan ahead?
Yeah.
But on Twitter, I am KYLAZHAO_, so my name underscore. On Instagram, I am KYLAJZHAO, so Kyla J Zhao. And then on TikTok, which I've been getting more into, my handle is Kylazing around. KYLA lazing around.
Okay. We'll put those in the comments. And
Okay.
your website?
I think it's just my name, kylazhao.com.
Okay.
And,
That's
and
a
I
lot
have
to
a
keep track of.
newsletter, which I've been trying to get better about sending. I love your newsletter, so I've been trying
Oh,
to get better
thanks.
about sticking to a regular schedule of mine.
Okay, y'all sign up so she has a motivation to stick to a regular schedule.
Yes.
You have been a delight. I'm just so thrilled for you. You have this storybook story really about your career so far, and it sounds like everything's falling into place for you, and it's just lovely to hear. So
Thank you. Thank
congratulations,
you
and I
so
hope the
much.
book's a smash.
I hope so too, but thank you. Yeah, and I just want to say again that I got very lucky and that I met amazing people throughout my journey and that they really helped me get to this point where I feel comfortable talking about myself and talking about my book. That I even have a book in the first place. It's really because of the advice and help of a lot of people.
I always ask, and I've neglected to ask you, I always ask for the best advice that you have for authors. And I wonder, is
Um,
that it? Connect with the community, because it does sound like it's been huge for you.
yes, and to also write what you love. So if you've been keeping track of my timeline, I started writing in June 2020. My book comes out in January 2023. That's 2.5 years. That's a really long time to be working on something if you're not passionate about it. So always write the book you want to read and don't chase after trends.
I love that. Thank you, Kyla. Thanks for being on
Thank you so
here.
much, Tiffany.
Take care. Happy holidays.
You too. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.